Call to order the August meeting of the Town of Newbury Human Resources Board. Present are Mark Leckman, Chair.
John Farrar.
Anthony Antico.
John Lucy.
Diane Doyle.
All right, we have called to order. First order of business is to review the minutes of the prior meeting. Let's take a couple minutes on that, please. And,
Which was June.
I'm sorry?
Which was
June. Right, we skipped July. Has everyone had a chance to get through the minutes? Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of accepting the minutes as written, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Shall I close that door?
It's open, it's a public meeting.
No, that has to
Oh,
stay open, yeah. Thank you. Next order of business, employee issues. John, anything that we should be aware of?
Nope, everything's quiet.
Diane?
Nothing I'm aware of.
The only other thing I wanted to mention is I think, was it in our last meeting, or it may have been a separate meeting with Tracy, she mentioned that building inspector, Sam,
The building inspector had requested, it's noted here under item 3 in the minutes.
right, from June.
So there was a request, which has
Right.
been completed and forwarded, so nothing at this point that I'm aware of.
Completed and forwarded, meaning?
The public records requested information
Oh, it
was
has been
provided.
forwarded to him, okay.
Nothing
And
else
there's
that
been
I know
nothing
of.
subsequent to that?
Nothing that I
Okay.
know of at this
So
point.
we'll put a hold on that. Nothing else relative to employee issues, nothing, Diane, that you're aware of?
Nope.
Something that's, I guess, tangential that I'll bring up in other business here. Personnel actions and job vacancies, we did in fact conduct the classification subcommittee meeting July 18th, and I think we are now squared away with,
There were 3 that were requested at that time, so everything that we have at this point is complete.
Right.
We rated the assistant finance director position, as well as a temporary office staff position, and then for some reason, the planning administrative assistant position was still out there, but I think at this point, we've looked at everything. And again, something that I'll bring up under other business is
Okay.
that in the context of rating the temporary office staff position, the classification schedule that we have has a top tier of 20.2 and a low tier of 12.2.
right,
And I think based on the nature of where we are with some of our positions, that schedule needs to be expanded
okay.
in terms of the salary ranges.
Mhm.
So that's something that I think we need to take a look at, which
Okay.
would then incorporate potentially another classification review. But I
Okay.
think first thing we need to do is look at how we expand that schedule.
Okay,
Because that schedule has been here since 2009 when I came.
all right, and you suggested that, would that be a subcommittee meeting in advance of September's meeting, or?
I just think we need to take a look at how we expand it from a salary range perspective.
Okay, but I would think it's something we would want to do some homework on in advance of the next meeting,
Correct.
so it might require the
Yeah, I mean,
benefit of a subcommittee.
sure,
So that would be yourself, Tony, myself.
yeah.
Let's take a peek at, Tony, you amenable to that?
Oh, fine.
Grab a little bit of time sometime between now and the September meeting for the purposes of reviewing the classification table
Sure.
and determining the best way would be to expand the range, up and or down.
Correct.
Okay. Let's look at calendars here, if you have access to yours.
I'm actually out until the 11th,
You're out until September the 11th, starting when?
starting next Tuesday, the 3rd.
Okay.
Good for you.
And I'm out of the country from the 11th to the 22nd. So, the 10th to the 22nd, I'm sorry. So, Are
Just hold a
you,
meeting in Italy.
I'm sorry?
So it'll have to be in the next 2 days, which will be tough, or when we get back. It'll have to potentially be,
3 weeks out, 4 weeks out.
you're going in 10.
Yeah, I mean, is there a code red attached to this, or?
Nope, it just needs to be addressed,
Okay,
but it's not code red.
okay. Tony, then, if you're okay, why don't we look towards, the week of Monday, our next meeting is scheduled for the 23rd,
23rd.
right?
Right, which,
So we can discuss it further at that meeting, but why don't we try to plug a subcommittee meeting in now as a placeholder, and we can confirm that on the 23rd? Other than the morning commitment on the 25th, I'm free all that week.
Mhm.
Diane?
schedule
Are
the
you
20, I have something on the 25th, any other day, I'm fine.
Okay, Tony?
I'm okay on the 27th, Friday. Is that-
Office is closed then, right?
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
How about either the 24th or 26th?
26 would be better.
Thursday, the 26th,
Okay.
What time?
10 a.m.?
10 a.m. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Thursday, the 26th at 10 a.m., thank you.
In preparation of that, I'll see if I can gather any information on how those rates were originally set, or maybe even contact MMA, or see if any other communities have something that's of more of an experience. So I'll try to see if I can do some research on that.
Okay, thank you. Or they didn't hold. Okay, thank you. Nothing else in personal actions or job vacancies?
No.
Discrimination and or ethics issues, nothing that, or safety issues, John?
No.
Safety issues are hopefully a thing of the past, right?
Yes.
It's been a while. Okay, other business. So, let's cover the manager's letter, that's a follow-up to previous discussions, right?
So, we had a discussion about replacing the manager's handbook with kind of a letter from the town administrator along with kind of a purview of guide.
Yes.
John had done some original work on that and had sent along some information for us to look at. I didn't bring it with me. Tracy was out for a couple of weeks on vacation,
Right.
so that is kind of,
Okay, so it's been held up there.
a little bit held up, yeah. So
Okay, so
we'll have that for the next
All
meeting.
right, we'll defer that to September. John, did you have anything else you wanted to discuss relative to that manager's letter?
Did I send that to you as well?
Yeah.
Everybody has a copy of
Yes.
the draft.
John, are you familiar with what that conversation was about?
I'm gleaning it, I saw the letter, so I kind of
Okay,
got the,
yeah, we just felt,
basically a cover letter,
yeah, we just felt we needed something
introductory sort of.
to address to the manager's population
Yep.
about the importance of consistency, the importance of doing the right things by the employees of the town.
Right.
And one letter was to be attached for the administrative group, administrators, the department heads, and the other letter to the rank and file.
Sure.
That's it.
Okay,
Well done, by the way, Jim.
We'll have,
Well done.
more on that in September.
so the other,
I'm sorry.
oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
Go ahead. No, that's it on that
Okay.
subject.
The other two issues that are listed here under new business, sick pool bank and non-exempt weather closing policy. You may recall that these are both issues that we addressed about a year ago. It had been brought to the attention of the HR board that there was some momentum, if you will, building in towards both of those possibilities among the employee population. And it was brought to our attention. And we had discussions about it. It was just over a year ago, actually. I looked back in the minutes, and I think it was the June meeting of 2018 where we discussed both issues subsequent to that comment. And I think our correct me if I'm wrong, I think the board's position was that they were both worthy subjects to bring to the Board of Selectmen. I don't think we were necessarily taking a position on either one, other than saying that they had both been brought to our attention. They were both, I thought, reasonable requests, something that the Board of Selectmen needed to be aware of. At that time, you may recall, we were working under the terms and conditions of the old personnel bylaw in town, which would have required any changes to go to the BOS and then subsequently to town meeting.
Right.
That has subsequently changed. Now it only requires Board of Selectmen's approval. That's a sidebar. I did in fact attend the Board of Selectmen's meeting, I think it was late June of 2018, and broached both of these topics with the board. I recently reviewed the video of that meeting to refresh my memory on the response. And I think it's fair to say that the Board of Selectmen's response at that time was neutral. I think it was more enthusiastic relative to the sick pool bank as a possibility, and perhaps a little bit less so to the prospect of paying non-exempt employees for emergency office closings. And if you recall, that's a subject that had come up about 18 months ago after a very tough winter, and it came up through the employee population of the library. I think they had 3 or 4 of the 10 or 12. I think there are a total of 10 or 12 non-exempt employees in town.
There were no more than 7 or 8.
7, okay. And I think at least 3 of those were employed by the library at the time. Diane and I took the opportunity to sit with those employees as well as the library administration staff to hear their thoughts and concerns about it. Brought it to this group. Subsequent to that, we brought it to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen, I think, was, again, rather neutral in their reaction to it. The only person who spoke from the Board of Selectmen at that time was Chuck Beer, who indicated that he would be willing to vote on moving it forward. He wasn't advocating for it, but he suggested that he would be fine bringing it to town meeting to let the citizens of the town decide the issue. Again, this is the issue of payment of non-exempts for emergency closings. I reported back to this board at that point, and frankly, that's where it stopped. Regarding the sick pool bank, because that in theory is budget neutral, it's a volunteer program, I think we determined that the only cost that would have been absorbed by the town would be the cost of administering or bookkeeping for the program. And there was some small concern about what that might cost or who would be doing it for that matter. And that's really where both of these issues stopped. Right? We chose not to move forward in either one. Again,
There was an issue with the sick pool bank in terms of confidentiality and liability on the town's part in terms of reviewing medical information that was presented to us and determination and who would make that decision and so forth. So that was
something you brought up.
that was
Right.
another
Okay.
issue that, and I think that was really kind of what slowed that
Okay.
discussion down.
Yeah.
Just as a side point.
One of the adjuncts to that too, was the perception amongst the employees, the participants and the non-participants, and the stress that causes perception of who's in the pool and who's not,
Right.
and the resentment that could in a small division, because that information is going to pop out.
Right. Clear to say there were too many unanswered questions.
Yeah.
And I think we decided at that point to just not continue to pursue it.
Right.
And the other thought that we discussed at that time was, is that not an administrative town decision as opposed to a town vote? I mean, is that something that stops at Tracy's desk and the selectman's desk, and would you really bring that to a full town vote in a town meeting?
No, now, again,
Yeah.
because of the change in the
Yeah.
wording of the bylaw.
The OSO.
Now it would be a Tracy and Board of Selectmen's
As far as
decision.
changing the bylaw, but as far as dissemination of the benefit, that's the local law.
Yeah.
You can have
Well,
35
there is no
people come
bylaw
on.
now.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
there
what I'm
is
saying, if, you know, if there was.
Yeah, this is a decision that
Correct.
that Tracy and the Board of Selectmen can make with our input, basically, with our recommendations. They can choose to accept them or not. And so, for the reasons already stated, both of those issues kind of died on the vine last summer, and remained so until about 3 weeks ago, when I got a call from Leslie Haley on both subjects. And, you know, I explained that, I asked Leslie if she was comfortable with my mentioning that she was the one who brought it to my attention. She said she absolutely was. And I asked Leslie to describe for me the way that it would come to her attention again. I asked her whether employees of the town had come to her making a specific request to get this on the table again, you know, as a formal request to the board, or whether it was just something that you know, had been part of the office little discussion, if you will, locker room conversation, dining room conversation, whatever you might call it. She described it as the latter, not the former. This is not an individual or group coming to her saying, this is something we want, this is something we need, but rather Leslie described it as something that she had been made aware of, and she thought it would be a good idea to bring it to my attention, which I appreciated, as was the case a year ago. It wasn't Leslie that brought it to our attention a year ago, but, and, you know, Leslie made it clear, of course, that as it relates to the non-exempt closing issue, you know, she is not subject to the terms and conditions of that, you know, and so she has no vested interest in bringing that to our attention. She was doing it really, I think, as a favor to other employees. So I promised Leslie that I would get it back on the table. I thought, again, as I did a year ago, it was something worthy of discussion.
Didn't we come to an inaugural conclusion that it was a rounding error amount of money? And that, isn't it fair from school teachers to employees who are told to stay home and operate from home in dangerous weather, and when buildings must be closed, they get paid? And if, we discussed that at some length, it appears.
We did, but we did not come to closure on whether we were
No.
going to make it an official recommendation of the board. At least that's my recollection of it. Is that consistent with other people's?
Correct, and then I think you did take it to the Board of Selectmen to see what
I
their
did.
appetite might be.
Yeah.
And you felt that that was something that was not a welcome.
Yeah, at the time, my judgment was, and I brought it back to the board for our next meeting, that there were many much more considerable budgetary issues that were going to be discussed at town meeting, and we thought, discretion being what it is, that this would probably not be another brick in the load that we wanted to bring to the town meeting, and that's where it's at.
Yep.
That may or may not be the case today. I had done a good deal of homework on this, as you may recall, and did determine that a number of the surrounding towns, similar size, type, shape, do in fact compensate non-exempt employees for emergency closings. Not all.
You showed us the Hamilton Wenham program.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that you know, that the majority, I don't know if it was the vast majority, but I think I probably polled 8 or 10 different towns of our size and type, and I think certainly the majority of them, maybe it was 7 or 8 out of the 9 or 10, did in fact compensate folks. You know, Tracy had made me aware of the fact that, without getting into all the particulars of it, that we can't look at this in isolation. We have to look at it as it relates to the entire compensation program of the town. It's quite possible that Newbury may offer its employees, exempt and non-exempt, other benefits that these towns don't. And so you know, you can't make this decision in the vacuum of, you know, because Rowley does it this way, we have to do it. You know, the fact is that our employees may enjoy other benefits, other considerations in town that surrounding towns don't, and therefore maybe it's considered a wash. So I promised Leslie that I would get that discussion into the conversation tonight. to determine if in fact we want to take another look at both those subjects.
I just want one question, just looking back at history, the list of 78, okay, it was monumental.
Long-term things are.
Oh, yeah, that was a long, I mean, the Board of Selectmen and the town government, I would presume, has the ability to come to an ongoing decision about a particular happenstance of nature, and which I presume also they did. And it may very well be as an on-call basis, rather than putting something in you know, book page, paragraph number, etc. That this is a you know, the town is more than willing to look at the situation as it develops, because I remember the list of 78. I was away for 2 weeks for the Guard, so
Correct.
you know what
Good
happened.
point.
And at that time, I was a teacher, so, but during that time also, I got paid from the school department, because that's their program that they have, so.
Valid point.
That's an ad hoc basis, in other words,
Yeah.
makes the judgment. The governor told us to stand down for 10 days.
Sure.
Shut the roads off, no
Right.
driving, and basically, the judgment call would be who makes the ad hoc decision,
Mm.
what's severe enough to open the spigot for reimbursement as opposed to just measuring what might be. I mean, you're right, it's a once in a
Right.
half century.
One of the things that you might want to look into, I'm not even sure what the path would be for this, but there are certain things that qualifies for reimbursement by the state under emergencies too. You know, if there is an emergency shutdown, a declaration by the governor or something extended, if it goes into a federal subsidiary, to help defer some of the costs incurred by that event, whether or not salaries for closed buildings qualifies, I'm not sure. Those are questions you might want to find out, because that could provide a lot of staring factors there too.
And federal assistance, for example.
Exactly.
Like an
When
hurricane.
when we have big incidences like that too, it's declared as a state of emergency or, whatever. What that does is that's very important, because now that opens up, state assistance and reimbursements and federal reimbursements. Now, whether or not salaries for closed businesses, public businesses, qualifies, I have no idea.
Yeah, I think what we want to be careful of is separating those two issues,
Right.
The norm would be something that falls outside of a state mandated closure or governmental emergency. This is a town by town decision. Tracy's decision may be, we're closing the library and town hall today, and Rowley may not,
Right. Or the town hall might be closed, the library may not.
possibly.
That kind of thing, so
Yeah.
depending on what the
But
situation
as
is.
of now, the language does in fact read that non-exempt employees do not get paid for hours lost.
Right.
Unless they make up the time within a
Right.
45-day
Get to that,
period, and which we had worked with the library and other
Correct.
folks to say, okay, we're not gonna change the language to say you're compensated, but we're gonna expand the time. Because
Yeah,
previously it
exactly.
had to be within the same pay period.
Right.
And we had a situation where one particular pay period had 22 hours of days where we were out. We had 2 storms week after week,
Right.
where the office was closed for 3 days, which represented 22 hours. And they said, we have people that have daycare issues and so forth. So if we could expand the time that we could have to make
Right.
up those hours, assuming that we wanna make sure that the work that people do here is getting done, so we did, under
did
the
change,
new
you're right.
policy, give them, I think it was 45 days,
Yeah.
or an agreed upon time between the
Between the
manager,
manager and
the
the.
town administrator, as well as the employee
Correct.
to make up the time.
Correct, that we kind of split the baby in half, pardon the expression. We did change the language so that, as Diane suggests, so that the employee who had, the non-exempt employee who lost hours would have an extended period of time to make them up. And I think we did say, generally within a 45-day period. It used to be within a 15-day period, I think, right, within the next pay period, right?
Within the pay period.
And so that created a bit of a release of the pressure, for somebody to have to make it up within a week or so. And even after the 45 days, I think we said, or an extended period of time, as long as it's agreed upon by the employee, the manager, and the town administrator. So I think we were sensitive to what we were hearing, and as a result, we did create that language change, which I think is a significant help to people. I would think that that would cover most of these circumstances. Perhaps not all. But again, it has come to our attention, so I think our responsibility is to have this conversation and determine if in fact we want to take another look at either one of these subjects. And if so, then I would bring Tracy into the conversation as well, and make sure that she's at this next meeting to give her an opportunity to have some input.
It would be good to measure the potential. In other words, if you think about schools closed in 4 or 5 days, and as you indicated, 2 storms in a single year, basically quantify it.
Yeah, we did this math last year.
Yeah, we did the math,
We did.
and I think we came back to the idea that for all intents and purposes, the number of people we're talking about, it's a town rounding error.
Yeah,
Board of Selectmen, were they hesitant because of the administrative difficulty or the algorithm that has to be built, or the money?
I think it was the look.
Yeah,
I
the
think it was the
concept, I think it's just
perception,
what's
I
the
think it was
look?
the perception of paying people for not working.
Okay.
Correct. It was, and again, I say that, full disclosure, I said that was not articulated, that was my sense
Yes.
of the crickets, if you will, that I got from the board that day. There were a lot of,
I can hear them
Yeah.
thinking
And-
out loud
and
letters
so-
to the editor.
yeah, it wasn't, and I did say that, and I think Diane and I sat down, we did some of the math that day. I think, we're talking about 7 or 8 or 9 employees. In a typical bad year, maybe you have 4 days of closure. I think we looked at what the norm was over a 10-year period, and, the highs and lows, and so.
But there's certain things that you have to factor in the what ifs. It's not the what ifs all the time. This is, I think, falls square to what
Like an
ifs.
Yes.
extended period of time, I think is a big concern.
You used the word policy before on the 45 days. Is that policy written in the personnel
Yes.
policy?
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it
Okay,
is.
so
It's
that's-
a pretty fair expansion.
and we took
Yeah.
great
And
length.
it's not concrete, there's flexibility.
Yeah, there's flexibility beyond that.
Right, but
Right.
that's, I
Right,
think
right.
that's,
Yeah, and so again, we may land exactly as we did a year ago, which was,
Maybe enough.
that's
Yeah,
a
I
piece
think on
of
that
it.
issue, it's addressed as a, we're gonna move on. Yeah,
Sorry?
I think on that particular
Yeah.
issue, we should come and say, discussed and addressed the issue. There you go. Yeah. We see the hardship, we made a recommendation, and we give that hardship, expand the time, plus give latitude
Right.
on a case-by-case basis. You know.
Right.
And I think the general, like welcoming of the change in the policy was one that was satisfactory. I haven't heard one single thing.
Yeah, nor have I, again, until Leslie brought
That's
it to my
important.
attention.
So I haven't heard one single thing, and I think the perception was, yes, that would help. That's great.
it's
That
fair.
Expanding, if that's
Right.
fair, expanding the
Right.
time, giving people the opportunity to make up the hours and earn the money and work the extra hours at, within reason
Right.
was,
My
was
question is, I don't know how this works, but is it a reimbursement of time, or are they not paid until it's made? In other words, if something happened in a pay period,
They're
are
not
they
paid
getting, they're not
until,
paid
they're
until,
not paid
okay.
until they make up the
So
hours.
it's not a reimbursement of either end.
Mhm.
Right,
Mhm.
right. And I think one of the assumptions we made was that, that it does become, again, you call it a rounding error, but I think we computed that it might be $12,000 to $15,000 is what it might cost the town.
I don't even think it was that much.
I thought it was in those high 5-figure range.
I mean, we took out, we basically came up with like
We looked at the average
yeah,
hourly rate, times the number of employees involved, times the number of days, and I thought it was
I remember
about
$5 to
$5.
$7.
5 to 7?
I thought it was 5 to 7, I didn't think it was.
Okay, I thought it was more than that. Okay, so are we saying as a board that we are comfortable with that policy,
And
that
John's
piece
right.
of being left as is?
Absolutely.
The 45-day expansion is.
The accommodation, the 45 days with some expansion beyond that, if there's three-way agreement,
Yeah.
is sufficient and appropriate,
And Diane's input that she's not heard a peep.
I have not heard of it.
okay? Good on that?
Good.
All right, and the other one, the sick pool bank. do we wanna move that forward to a discussion with Tracy and or the Board of Selectmen again?
Well, my position's always been that sick time is not to be bargained, it's not, there's no ownership of sick time. It's not like it's vacation time, so if somebody doesn't have, it's like an insurance policy. Like I can't go to Geico and say, hey, look, I didn't crash my car all year, can I have the $5,000 you would have given me to fix my car if I did? You know what I mean, it's like it
Put my
doesn't,
premiums back.
pull my premiums back or
Yeah.
something, it just doesn't, it doesn't pass the McDougall test of sick time being anything that any individual can bargain with if it's not theirs. It's insurance.
Unless that employer agrees otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. But then
We
we don't,
have
right.
many,
Those are usually,
if you don't use the sick
those are
time,
usually PTOs when you start talking that way though.
uh,
Isn't it usually like, you start talking personal time off, that's just a big pool, is call it whatever you want.
but no, I know, for example, again, to use it as an example, with the city of Boston, the public school system. When my buddy retired as a headmaster of a high school, and he got, I forget, it was something like 80% of his unused sick time.
Clearly, I mean, I guess it's whatever the municipality agrees to. I'm just saying personally, and the way it's written now, I don't see where that is the case for Newbury. And it's just my opinion is,
We don't get paid for sick time.
I was gonna say,
We do
in
not
the,
get compensated for
with
unused
the
sick
time.
union
Buybacks or
provisions, there isn't any then.
no.
Oh, okay. In the city of Boston, it
So you
was.
Right.
get sick time to be used under certain criteria if you
On
leave
an
the town
accrual
of,
basis.
on
you
an
accrue
accrual
it, yeah.
basis, and if you leave the town of Newbury, you do not get to take that with you.
It doesn't go with.
No.
Correct.
So vacation time does, stuff like that.
Accrued vacation time, you can be paid out for that, but you have to use it within a certain, you know what I mean? So sick time, you do not
How
get.
how many days, if I may ask?
So sick time, full-time employees receive 10 hours per month, which is 120 hours of sick time per year. They can accumulate it up to 960 hours to be used for, say, a lengthy illness. Or, you can use it for the care of yourself, doctor's appointments, or for your immediate family. I mean, we can read the language from the policy document, but part-time employees, 20 hours, receive half of that, so they can accrue up to 480 hours. But again, that accrued time, you cannot take it with you. So it basically, what it does is it is meant to encourage people to bank their sick time, so that if they were to have a surgery or an illness or what have you, that time is available for themselves. You could quite honestly have an employee who's been here for 5 to 7 years, who uses all their sick time every year, who then runs out of it and finds himself in a position where he needs it and doesn't have it. So
In Aflac, I mean, the town offers, subsidy, they offer a
optional
disability
insurances for
insurance.
short-term
and so-
disability, et cetera.
And the town pays for that.
No, it's optional, you
Oh,
opt in and you
okay.
contract with an outside provider that we have, and it's done as a payroll deduction, but the town does not compensate for that. So then you get into the question, well, if Sally wants to, come in and request a sick time bank, request, we're then gonna be looking at, well, how did she use her sick time in the past? And we're gonna, are we gonna discriminate against her because she's been sick for 3 or 4 years in a row where she's used all her time? I just think there are too many
Way too many moving parts.
moving parts and varying things where you could set yourself up for a situation where you're treating people,
A lawsuit,
it's,
it's an algorithm that's impossible.
If somebody wants to, donate their vacation time, absolutely have at it, because that's yours to give, in my opinion. That's-
but you could have two people who've been here for 10 years, they've accumulated their sick time, one person has 800 hours available to them because they've used the time according to when they were sick and needed the time off. You could have somebody else who's been out clearly for, 3 weeks a year consistently, and you're gonna have those two people come before the board and request that, and then how are you gonna, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Like, who's gonna qualify?
who qualifies, who doesn't, who makes the decision, what information? There's just too many varying, I've always been of the belief that there are too many moving parts, variables that could set us up for a
And
situation.
too many
where we're-
internal decisions,
Mhm.
subjective decisions.
Mhm.
And in the circumstance that Tony alluded to, my mother and father were headmasters and teachers for 44 and 29 years respectively. And my father didn't use a sick day in 44 years. My mother, not a sick day in 29 years. And like Tony's pal who retired, 80%, my mother retired about 7.5 months early because she had all of that time ganged up, and as did my father, except that he worked to the last minute and then got a stipend for it. But they didn't pay cash, they just allowed you to walk out the door 7 or 8 months earlier than the target date. And the primary, my father being a headmaster, was on the executive committee for the school committee for the Boston representation. And it was a primary issue regarding encouraging teachers not to take it too loosely, because that's a double dip. You got to pay a substitute teacher. Somebody must be, by the union rules, in that classroom. So they're paying the guy out sick, and then they're paying the substitute. So why not encourage your teachers not to be unhealthy, not to risk, issues. And so it had its merits, and it was union devised.
I think as a concept, this board felt that it was a great idea
Yeah.
to support one another, to help each other out. It was a great message to send. I think that was the discussion and the feeling, but then when we got into the nitty gritty, I think it was just, there's too many moving parts. My feeling is it's gonna open up too many Pandora's.
But there are towns around here that do have it.
There are.
I mean,
Yeah.
I have to go into negotiations with the Hamilton town manager shortly, because we're coming up on lease requirements for our rod and skeet and trap shoot club. And I might just ask for an hour extra time to say, describe to me the nuances that you've run into.
The
Just-
black and white sounds kind of, what's the real world like
What's
when you
the-
go to administer it?
What does it smell like when you open the door?
I would be curious to see how our sick time accruals stack up to other communities as well. I think we receive 10 hours per month.
Mhm.
We work a 4-day work schedule. I think we are extremely generous with our sick time here.
You got 960 hours total?
Well, you can accumulate up to 960
You
hours.
cap out at 1440.
You cap out at 1440,
It's
but
120 a year.
full-time, 120 a year. So I think that's,
That's that's luxurious.
Yeah. All right, so I don't hear or sense any groundswell of
No.
interest in revisiting this subject today. Am I correct in that?
Ever.
Tony?
no, I can't join in that. That's, because I think there's a way to do it. And you're looking at some individuals who perhaps ends up, unfortunately, a catastrophic situation, who has gone through all the available disability, all the whatever programs is out there, and this is the only thing that may provide some assistance. I know the Commonwealth has one of their own, so. But everything that is done, that has to be done by legislation. I read a few of these things, when I was reading this, researching this thing before, but that's the only thing that troubles me, if somebody needs some time, and I've gone through my 960 hours, I have them there, unfortunately, Formaker, I'm still alive, but my buddy down the hall isn't, he's got a problem. So I'd like to give him some of my available time that I would have had, so.
And then you're running into the issue where that individual and all of that benevolence has a massive heart attack or an automobile accident the following month, and they've depleted their bank. That was the argument that I heard from the fellows in Rowley. Pal was no longer on the committee, but he was on their HR committee, and that was one of the gestures that he said is problematic. I mean, do we offer long-term care?
We don't offer long-term care, we have long-term disability available to
No,
employees.
long-term care for.
Really, nursing home
Well,
coverage.
in other words, once one is rotated out of all the severity of the disability and are still living but need now palliative care as opposed to medical care.
No.
You might want to consider a group program. Again, they purchase it on their own. There'll be volume issues. You'd have to get enough enrollment to make it work, but it's out there.
Long-term care is very expensive, I mean, you're talking thousands of dollars.
Oh, there's
So I don't know that
no
that's
doubt
something
about
that,
it. Yeah.
I mean,
Well, so here's a thought. Tony, your points are well taken, and I share some of them. it doesn't sound like we have commitment one way or the other here. So what I might suggest, I'm happy to take it on, is, well, let me dial back. So a year ago, the only homework I did was, you know, which towns, if any, in the surrounding area do in fact have a sick pool bank, and quite a few did. Not the same numbers that were reimbursing in the other issue, but there were plenty of towns of our size and type that did, plenty that didn't. What I didn't do is have any live conversations with the people who were administering those programs, asking, you know, if you had to do it over again.
If you can turn back the hands of time.
Yeah, you know, or are we overthinking this? You know, is it in fact easier, smoother, you know, more consistent than we're letting on here, or we're assuming? So, you know, given the fact that it's, I describe it as budget neutral, I'm not sure if that's the right choice of words or not, but given that it would be a voluntary program, is there a willingness to at least have me do a little bit more homework on it? And then bring it to this group next month and say, look, I've spoken to 4 towns, and 3 of the 4 would say if they could turn back the hands of time, they wouldn't do it. Game, set, match.
Well, anything this important and complicated, it's hard to be anything but equivocal. There's no harm in examining.
Yeah.
No harm in drilling down a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a question of administering the program, that's different than the fairness of the program, the appropriateness of the program, in my eyes.
Or even just add it to Diane's backpack.
Yeah, I think this also falls, when you're doing this analysis, I think this particular situation falls square into, again, we have to prepare for the what ifs, not the what is. You know, just because these towns we're talking to haven't run into any adversities,
Right.
doesn't mean the adversity's not there,
Right.
you know?
Understood.
And so, I mean, some of the things that you talked about, you know, just who, if you get into a conflict, who gets it, who doesn't, you know, who makes that decision? When the pool gets depleted, what happens? I mean, just because those variables haven't happened before we talk,
Yep.
I think that definitely has to be included in that conversation.
Yeah.
Because
Was there ever a comment or a discussion about, rather than the individual employees contributing to a sick pool bank, that there be a town contribution to a sick pool bank? So in other words, the town would designate that every year, as a town, they would put X number of hours in a sick pool bank.
I'm not aware that we had that
Was that ever
discussion.
discussed? In my back of my mind, I'm thinking that there was some,
I
was
don't
there an
recall.
easier way for us to, because it became like, well, is it 2 hours, and then what happens? There was a lot of discussion about, well, once the contribution's made, then what happens?
Yeah.
There was
now, is
no,
this person eligible, whoever contributed, are they eligible for their next accrual? You know,
Right.
does that count as hours that they had, so they can't, they don't get that other 10
Right.
hours
so
the
do
next
they,
month?
yeah,
You know,
so do
there's
they
so
only,
many things,
do they
yeah.
only cap out at 9:50 now, because they've donated 10, you know?
And so
because
for
it-
how long?
But there was never a discussion about the town establishing a sick pool?
There may well have been, I don't recall.
Okay, I was just in the back of my mind
No
thinking,
recollection of that.
No.
And that would be an entirely different beast.
correct,
Yeah.
Let me do a little bit of legwork.
okay.
If the board is amenable to that, and I'll report back and at the next meeting, you know, whether, you know, the towns that have in fact created this are at peace with it, or are they all second guessing?
Second guessing, yeah.
Yeah.
The town opening a program would be a defined liability. Be like a medical reimbursement plan in public companies or private companies. Those are aligned, full-fledged liabilities, and they have to account for it
Correct.
on the books.
I would imagine that would be a separate line item voted on by town,
Yep.
an allocation to the town.
Yeah.
That's something I think that's town
Mhm.
meeting,
Yeah.
which we usually have.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
right?
I think the sick pay plan, as it is quite generous. And you're talking roughly, what, 5 years of accumulated hours, give or take, or 4 years?
More.
That's more than
6?
Well, 120 divided into 960. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. 6?
Yeah,
6
6 years.
8.
That's 6,
Is
7,
it
8, no, 8, yeah,
Yeah,
7 or 8.
I mean, that's a long
It is
list.
generous, yeah.
And if there were an adjustment to be made, the adjustment might be to open the cap up in a modest way downstream as the budget permits.
All right, let me do some investigating, and I'll report back at the September meeting what I've discovered. And-
I have a copy of the town of Wenham's. Did I get that from you, or you might want to?
Must
I have one as well.
Oh, yeah,
I
okay,
think
you all must
we
have
got-
one
Well,
then.
I probably have.
Yeah,
one.
okay.
Thank you, I must have
That's quite well done.
distributed that
Yeah.
a year ago.
But like you said, talking to the boots on the ground would be.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I didn't get any further than, do you have a program, and if so, can you send it to me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else in new business or other business?
I wanna just report that the personnel policy manual is up on the website, which it has been. We've modified it to include the extended index.
I saw that.
Ah.
I actually copied it out this afternoon.
Yeah.
And
I tried the other couple of days ago, although maybe a week ago, and I couldn't.
it's on there with the
Right.
extended index.
Okay.
All full-time employees of the town, with the exception of the PD, has signed and acknowledged that they have received a copy.
Mhm.
All full-time and permanent employees,
Actually, the police, you have to fold it all.
I know that's coming. The ones that we still have yet to receive are the call firefighters, which are considered fractional employees of the town.
Right.
And
Find them
you,
somewhere.
paid board members.
It was good
Of
input.
all full-time employees, which now sounds like that's been resolved, all full-time employees and permanent employees of the town have signed an
Okay.
acknowledgement that they received it.
Is there some consistency as to why the paid board members have not?
Just because it got rolled out a little bit later.
Okay,
We're gathering emails and information and trying to determine who should get it, who shouldn't, what constitutes
Okay.
an employee, what doesn't, so.
but you're not anticipating any issues?
No, I'm not,
to-
it's just really just.
Full
we're
compliance.
following-
Full
Exactly.
compliance, great.
And then the last thing on the last, the June meeting, we had a discussion about revisiting our quarry process, and it was tabled because John wasn't here.
Right.
So ensuring that whoever is supposed to be conducting quarries has the full authorization and understands the process to do that.
Yeah, what I'd like to do, because I just saw that too, what I'd like to do is get somebody, I would recommend we get somebody, whether it's HR, somebody Corey certified, which, when you get Corey certified, then you can do all that.
Who's currently quarry certified?
I don't think we have anybody out of town level, that's, well, the police department clearly did, but I mean, we can't disseminate, legally can't disseminate Corey information.
Right.
Unless you as HR or somebody.
Tracy.
Tracy, or whoever it is, becomes Corey certified, which isn't really, it's not a big strenuous process. Now, she can do the quarries for, all of everybody under.
Right.
I think we need to make sure that whoever, I think that's a little bit of a gap at this point.
Yeah, let me do this.
Because my understanding was, it used to be that the head librarian was Corey certified, and now we've had a change in that, and I think she's not actually certified.
I don't know if she ever, I'm not really sure if she ever really was, or I'm not sure what that was, but how about we do this? We table this until I'll get some answers, because I finally have a job to do. I'm excited about that. And I'll get some answers as far as what Corey certified means and what a person
That'd be great.
certified. It's easy from my end,
Yeah,
but I'm not sure what.
because from the town's perspective, that's a Tracy issue, she needs to designate someone.
Somebody has to,
Right, and has to ensure that that individual or individuals has in fact gone through whatever procedural.
Yeah, the days of calling us and saying, hey, is this person all set? Yeah, those are gone. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So all the quarries that have been done up to this point have been beyond the scope of the law, I guess?
Well, the thing, not necessarily what you can do, what you can do, to get around, you don't really, if you're not gonna have somebody do your own quarries, the individuals, that can be part of their application process. You can they can provide a sealed quarry. You can get your own, you can get your own, you can get your own, make that part of your application process, almost like the transcripts of a college. You'll get, and that'll satisfy that way too.
Right, but you're also then having that information come from the individual that's swearing that they, to me, that just,
That's not the optimal way to do it.
it's not the optimal
Yeah,
way.
I would rather.
Beware of a
yeah.
potential employee armed with an eraser.
No, they come sealed, you know, you have it sent right to, you know, here and sealed, you know, I mean, like I said, just like a transcript from college. Those are certified sealed, you know, not open.
But we have, you know, we have volunteers at the Council on Aging, we have volunteers in the library, we
Sure.
have librarians in the
Children's
library.
librarian, absolutely.
And this
There
issue's
needs to
come
be-
up several times.
And situations change too. You might have somebody in your employee for 5, 6 years, say, wait a minute, I heard, you know, it might be an issue, you know, from the time they're hired to the time, you know, something
Yeah,
might.
it would seem that a policy should be that at all times, the town should have a minimum of one employee designated as you know, outside of the PD, as the town's certified Cory administrator.
It might be acceptable, and I don't know, this is well looked into, but it might be acceptable to, you know, to get the police chief or his designee Cory certified to disseminate, it's all about the dissemination.
Mhm.
To, you know, certified to disseminate
Right.
information for potential employees for the town. of
Right,
Newbury.
right.
I don't know if that exists, that's what I'll find out.
Okay, so we'll discuss that at the next meeting.
Yes.
And should town council tone in and give you a sense of what the list looks like? Who may not
Who may not what?
be Cory certified?
Well, that's what we're gonna find out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and the other element is needs to be obviously a full-time employee, somebody who's stable and been here a while, has some history.
yeah, I mean, like I said,
I'm not putting that in your back, I promise you.
well, you just took it out of her back, right?
She just did.
Would it make sense to request, would it make sense for you and I to make a request to sit with Lisa to talk? Or you,
I'd like to get some
Okay.
foundation, I'd like to speak intelligently if I'm gonna be in front of Lisa, so I should need a little time to,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
to sort it out. I don't think it might be real simple, you know, I have the sense that it is.
Has this been brought to Tracy's attention already?
yes.
Okay.
And her feeling is, yes, we need to figure out how it keeps coming back
Okay.
to, you know, who does them, who's certified, who's responsible.
It never changed, it always has to be somebody, you have to be Cory certified and representing the entity that you're acquiring this information for. That has never changed. Who that delegated person would be in this organization, I don't know. I'm just, you know, that's what I'm gonna find out, and what the parameters are of that designation. I'll
Okay.
find out.
Thank you, so that's the
And once
first
we
step.
get that information, maybe some sort of a summary from legal counsel
Mhm.
would be.
Okay.
would
Like,
be-
I envision me coming up with something, and then we say, okay, this is what I've come up with, how does this fit into Newbury with this?
Right.
Right,
That's how I see it.
yeah, it's just come up several times, and point
Well-
is, Tracy has requested that the loop get closed, so we need to close the loop.
Yeah, it's quite possible that someone in Lisa's office, probably Kate, who's her HR partner or attorney of record, she's probably got this as a boilerplate
Sure.
in a file somewhere. This is not, we will not be the first town that's requested this information.
Correct.
So, I
But,
would say
yeah,
Kate Federoff. will
and I'm
probably have it.
sure there's going to be a whole separate section on who is permitted to be excluded because of Cory,
Mhm.
what their job titles are. There's gonna be so many
Right, okay.
things, you know?
You know, how do you protect the information?
Right.
Okay,
Cool, I got a
thank you,
job.
Diane, there's a bunch of stuff there. Anything else?
Assignment.
And I got an assignment.
Anything else to address before we ask for a motion to adjourn? Any other new business? Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Seconded? All in favor of adjourning? Aye. We are adjourned at